Welcome back, guys. Just like last time, we had some video issues, some technical difficulties, and this time we gained an extra guest. But now, previously, on Worlds Asunder.
We can make anything work. That's why a lot of these questions are so hard to answer. And all of it comes back to finding explanations for it to make sense. And the tricky part of that is to honestly stop thinking like a creator and start thinking as a person, as a human. Not, I am designing this and I think this is super cool and I want it to work this way, but if I were in this situation, if my family was in this situation, what kinds of stuff would drive us in these different directions? What kinds of things would we want when this is going on? And digging into that is how you make some of it make sense.
As storytellers, we want to capture the hearts, minds, and imaginations of our readers, mainly through our expertly crafted worlds.
Creating new worlds in any genre might seem like a daunting task, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel for every story.
Welcome, weary writers, to Worlds Asunder, a world-building and writer's life podcast.
My co-host is David Shadoin, better known as Shady. It's not just a descriptor, it's also his moniker.
And she's H.Y. Grigger, or you can call her Haley, your friendly post-apocalyptic wasteland elf.
Together, we've got enough published to fill a small shelf, but why should you listen to us? Because we called in some favors.
Every other week, we bring you the best and brightest to give you the tips and tricks on world building and character building like the pros. So, open up your ear holes.
Get out your pen and paper.
And get ready for us to tear Worlds Asunder. As previously promised, we're in another throwback episode with Do You Believe in Magic Part 2. Here's Clark to take us home.
Have you, I know that Shady and I are both a big fan of the series. Have you read the Lightbringer books by Brent Weeks?
I really need to. I honestly should just buy
really,
it right now.
You would enjoy it so much.
I can't recommend it enough. It is one of my favorite magic systems. And for me, it actually ties in really well to some of the stuff we've been talking about, because it's not just a magic system. It is a cosmology and a religion, but it also is structured politically really, really well. They have the 7 satrapies, and each region is associated with a different color. So they can bend light, essentially, right? They refract the different colors on the spectrum of light. And so they all have different, like a vice and a virtue that are associated with each color. And they all have different things that they're really good at. So the satrapy that's associated with green Luxon is really, really good at growing stuff, because it has all of these properties that aid in, agriculture and development. And so they have all of these different like associations between all the different microcultures in this country. And it takes all of the magic and it boils it down to like bare minimums, and it impacts almost every level of the society in the world that he created. And it is super, super cool. And I'm really sad that you haven't read it. It's one of my favorites.
I have been very gun shy because of the Night Angel trilogy. It is very popular. I really did not care for Night Angel.
That he hadn't written Night Angel, you would never have thought it's the same author.
That is what I have heard.
Yeah.
That is what I have heard.
They are very different.
It is not dark like Night Angel was.
It wasn't the dark that bothered me with Night Angel. But
did you not like Kyler? Yeah, we don't have to talk about it. It's okay. Yeah. You would never guess.
This week of Let's Review Brent Weeks.
Yeah, we want to shout out, if anyone out there knows Brent Weeks, I would love to interview him and just ask a million questions about Lightbringers.
So
send him my way.
It sounds like, I'll have to check into it, but it sounds like what he did is he really explored the depth, the implication, and the interconnection of the magic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kept his magic fairly simple, but then really dug into all of those aspects. And just from what you say, I can name where some of the how he set some of his different variables on his magic system that would make that work. Because if it's that deeply integrated into everything, I can tell you right now it's high prevalence. It's going to be higher ease of use because it's going to be safer to use. It's going to be fairly reliable. Like those are things that just naturally blend and support that kind of structure.
Mm-hmm. It may be a little lower prevalence. I don't know how
it's a little hard to tell because of the way that the books are written. It seems high prevalence because it is focused primarily on the magic users. But if you actually read into the context, the percentage of magic users in the world is very low compared to the common
probably
people.
Lower.
And you just get the government piece, which is run by the magic users, the really good ones, or the ones who are politically motivated to essentially move pieces on the board the right way.
And the politics are so good in that book. I want to do a whole episode just on politics and world building.
Oh, we will. It'll happen. Yeah. And we have a couple people in mind for that too. Clark probably being one of them.
I don't know. Politics are not my strong suit, both real world and fictional. I don't.
Once you read Lightbringer, we'll bring you back so that you can talk about how magic affected politics in that world. No, but that's one of the things. Like Brent Weeks, kind of like you said, you can almost see how he started with the magic system. Like I'd be willing to bet he started with the system itself, and then built all the nodes off of that based around the characters that he had and what he needed to work. Because you can almost see it as the books go on, like where it develops, and when you look back on it, you're like, yeah, no, that made sense. That there's only one way this could have been effect, or maybe there's a couple different ways, but it was very dependent on the characters in play and their either virtues or vices that will, are based on primarily the magic systems.
Right.
So,
and that's not to say that you have to start with the magic system. We have all of these things that are important in our stories, and all of these things that we can spend time on, and you can't start with all of them at once. You just can't. It's not how the brain works. That's not how time and productivity works. I got to deal with that a lot, where somebody would walk in and say, hey, here are these 3 things. They're all top priority. And I'd have to sit them down and have the conversation of that's not how that works. You rank them because I can only do one at a time. Even if you want them all at once, I can only turn in one at a time. So you have to tell me which one you want turned in first. It's kind of like that. And this is a thought that I'm continuing to develop. I have a couple of different ways I've talked about it. I haven't found the one that fully captures it. But we have these different aspects of story, and they, depending on who you are and what you prefer, you sort of have your own ranking of the ones that make the most sense to you and the ones you care the most about. And that's really where I think you should start. And the more I work with people, that's usually one of the first things I home in on now, is trying to figure out what is most important to you and what makes the most sense to you. So for people like me, I'm not trying to say I am these guys, but I can tell they're similar with Sanderson, or what you're talking about with Brent Weeks. We are able to start with the magic system and build everything off of the structure of our magic system. Other people have to build their characters and deeply understand their characters, and then they build everything around that. Like I said, here's what I want. How do I make it make sense? That this is the person I have, and this is the journey I want them to go through. How do I build the world that can put them through that journey? And how do I build other characters that will push them or stop them or do that kind of stuff? Or the opposite, you get really caught up in religion or in politics. And so it's like, I want this kind of political structure. I want these kind of political events. How do I then build everything else to make that work?
Yeah. How can I cause conflict in that world to push things forward?
Yeah. So you can approach from any of these angles. It doesn't have to be magic first.
Well, so that leads us in really well to your concept of seed crystals that you talk, which is also a term that they use in Lightbringer.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, in some of the later books. Totally unrelated.
Surprisingly, how you gain magic in a particular way.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's really cool. But so, you talk about how it starts at a single point. And so it sounds like that's referential for magic, but it also, is how people are going to build their worlds, how they're going to write their stories, right? Trying to start with one or two things. How important is it? I mean, you talked about this a little, to stay on one thing at first. And how do you choose that one thing? How hard is it to wrangle other people to make them choose one thing to start?
I'm still figuring that stuff out. The main thing I usually do with people is I talk through. I ask when you're reading a book. This is the question I ask pretty much all of my clients and a lot of people I work with at conferences. Is if you took all of the components of a book and overall the book was a solid, like had an average C minus, but one aspect, maybe two, was an A plus, which one would you need to be an A plus so that you forgive all of the C minuses? We can't drop into F territory because if anything hits the F territory, we just put the book down anyway. But like, what's the one where it's like, it's not great, but it's good enough, and this thing is really, really good, so I will overlook all of the not so great because of this one good thing. Like, what is that good thing for you?
That's a really hard question.
It is a very hard question, and that's part of where it doesn't have to be one, but seeing if you can pick two or three gives you multiple options to come from, or multiple directions you can come from.
What is it for you?
For me, it's generally it's the magic system, plot, and world building are usually the top three that I go through. So
we're gonna have to wipe that out. I just had an enormous cockroach. Oh, and it's
God.
gone. Hang on. Shit. Hang on. I haven't seen one in weeks. It's been a.
I would be done too.
Yeah. What's up, sports fans? So this is where our technical difficulty started. So first, let's jump into Shady's replays and break down the attacker's wonderful tactical surprise. First, you can see him climbing up the wall behind her, right there. And then, only a few minutes later, really only about 30 seconds later, we see the actual attack executed in almost near perfection. Due to this, some of the files got corrupted, making it a little bit harder to ensure that the rest of this cast goes over smoothly. So for those of you who are watching the video, you'll see something different. For those of you who are audio, you might hear a slight change. For the most part, don't let it affect you. I mean, if you're an audio listener, go ahead and head on over to YouTube and you can join the rest of us in this replay by Shady.
Oh, look, it'll go. And go ahead, Clark.
Yeah, so for me, when I'm talking about this stuff so far, the metaphor I use, I call it approach vectors, is if your story is like a point on a map and you're trying to figure out the best way into it. It's not perfect. I'm still trying to figure out the right way to talk about it. But for me, the main ones are usually are usually magic, plot, and world building are the most common things for me. So I know that like I was saying, I want to do a story about resolving a war, or I have people that are going to be escaping a prison, or I have somebody that I'm just going to put through the ringer because I'm awful. Or there will just be interesting stuff going on because I have these two kingdoms built out, or I have these factions going on, or there's interesting stuff going in the world, or I'll just start with the magic and find stuff from there. That's usually where I start, which is nice because then I get to start with that fun stuff. But the downside is the other parts of my story, they are weaker out of the gate, so I have to work longer before I can fully comprehend them. So like characters are lower in my ranks, I've realized. So when I start a book, it doesn't matter how much character work I do, how many of those little surveys I fill out, how much I look at who they are. I don't really get them until I am a good chunk of the way through the story. I can't start with the characters and build everything else out from the characters the way I can start with the magic system and build out from the magic system.
That's how I work too. I feel like I discovery write my characters a lot of the time to make them fit to what's going on in the story. So I understand that.
Yeah, but what about you guys?
Well, I guess Haley just pseudo answered it a little bit. Well, I guess no. You really just talked about your characters. Where would you normally start?
where would I start? Or I know that we were talking about if we were to read a C+ book, what would elevate it, or like what makes me keep reading?
Yeah, and those are usually the places that you start your own stories too. Those usually line up.
Yeah, and I do think that like a really cool world, because there's the joke that it's like you read because you're trying to escape, and then you close the book and you're like, damn it, I'm still on Earth, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that is probably a really big aspect of it for me. Like, even if the world is terrible and it's war torn and all of these awful things are happening, like there's really cool magic creatures, or there's really cool magic, or if I lived here, then I could go live somewhere gorgeous like Rivendell, or Waterfall City, and Dinotopia, something like that, right? Like really some of the visual stuff that I really enjoy. And then like the integrations into like normal society. So I talked about, I really enjoy like the politics. If the politics are good, whether that's a large scale or a small scale, that's something that'll really pull me in. It's like bigger scale intrigue, I think.
Is that what pulls you into your stories too?
Usually, yeah.
Figuring out those set pieces, figuring out what's going on politically, and
that's
factions.
my degree is in political science, and so that is probably part of that. That's me pulling in. I don't have the chemistry and the engineering, but
right.
I like to look at the way that factions interact and not just individuals. So
that makes sense. What about you, Shady?
Intrigue, right, is very, as a theme in general, right? How the sort of like what Haley's saying, how the factions interact, how the politics interact, how the world interacts, is a big thing for me. But I'll tell you, like when it comes to like my writing, or really even my reading, I am very fluent or fluid. Sorry, where it's
fluid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not just genre fluid. I've written like tons of different kinds of genres, but most of them all short stories where it's just like I skinned them under mill sci-fi, but they were like a business intrigue or a heist. But like sometimes I'll start, it just depends on what the story is to me, where it's like I might have a character, like the novel I just released, Companion to Ghosts. We started with characters and a problem set they needed to solve, and then we built out from there. And so I built this character
behind Shady's head. That is the rap from his first book that just came out.
Out now.
Nice.
Anyway,
so you like to start with problems and questions.
Sometimes. Alliance of Spirits short story, we started with a theme. We were like, what if we traded up Beauty and the Beast? What if we did a gender bender? And then the follow-up piece was like, all right, let's add magic to the world. And so we kind of started with that theme. We had no idea what the characters were going to be, what the races were going to be, what the problem set really was. But we added the magic, and then we went, okay, so this is going to create these kinds of problems amongst these, different factions. All right, what do we want the factions to be? So,
and that is one of the benefits of doing collaborative projects, is then you can lean on different people's strengths to find a common entry point for all of you, or you can even have one person kind of carry you until you get to the point that the other people can pick up the reins and take control of a different aspect.
And we know a lot of people who do shared worlds. And so we've been able to ask a lot of questions about that, because then you can like have different lines, or like different authors explore different like microcosms of the world, which is super cool.
Right. Nice. Yeah. So that's where I start with most of my stuff. Magic, world building, that's a big part of it. That's a big part of why I don't read just like general speculative fiction. I want the fantastical. I want the magic system. I want the world. So,
well, show us what you've got. I know that you've got your grid. So if you guys go and check out Clark's website, which we'll make sure we get posted in the show notes and everything, he has a ton of stuff in his blog and a ton of free resources that you guys can check out. You can buy a copy of his book, but this grid that we're going to go ahead and pull up is, I would call it kind of your blueprint.
Mm-hmm. Yep, this is.
If you learned one thing, yeah.
And this is the most concrete and fully fleshed out tool I have developed. I really hope to make more like this in the future, but I haven't quite figured out what they are yet. So, this is the blueprint. It is a breakdown of, I think each of these are universal variables that exist in any magic system. Some of them you've already heard us talking about, like in terms of prevalence or ease of use or how reliable something was, that kind of thing. And especially if you are, if you're familiar with Sanderson's laws, you will know the basic concept of hard and soft magic. I have the grid that I use to break down into 4 types of magic. But if you're familiar with Sanderson's types, they kind of run diagonally across my grid. So what Sanderson defines as a hard magic system, for me, sits up in hard rational, and what he defines as soft sits down in soft irrational. So I don't know. Do you guys want me to just like walk through the different pieces? Is there a specific thing you guys want to dig into? Because there's, it's up to you. There's other places we can direct your listeners or viewers if they just want to learn about the blueprint, but we can also go over that here too.
When I first read your book and talked to you, the thing that I thought was really unique that clicked for me that I had never heard of before was the differences between the rational and the irrational. So I think most people, you can maybe give us a sentence or two about the hard versus soft magic, but I think most people will kind of have a grasp on that. But the rational irrational was not what I thought it was going to be when I first saw that in, like the TOC. And I think that is super, super helpful.
Okay. Yeah. So hard and soft is just a matter of what percentage of the system is known or understood. So if you were to take your entire system, everything there was to know about it, the full limit of the powers, all of the rules, all of that kind of things, and turn it into a bullet list, a numbered bullet list, how many of those bullets do your readers know by different points of the book? And whatever that percentage is tells you sort of where your magic sits along the spectrum. So if you're above 50%, you're in the hard region. If you're below 50%, you're in the soft region. When you're in the middle, things are fluid and it doesn't matter as much. But it's all about knowledge and how much knowledge there is to know and how much of that knowledge you actually know. So simple systems like, it sounds like Lightbringer might have just like really 14 things you need to learn. It's probably more complicated than that. But
it starts really simple. In the first book, and then by the end of it, it's like they add,
even, Avatar: The Last Airbender. I mean, really, at the end of the day, we start. There's four things that people can control. That's it, and it gets a little more nuanced and a little more complicated, but it doesn't get much more difficult than that. It's a very simple system, which means that you very quickly can learn a large portion of what there is to know. Rational and irrational. That is all about it's basically how far will logic take you with the magic? And can you extrapolate from the portions you have seen to predict portions you haven't seen? So if I know that A plus B equals C, and I now know what C is, I should be able to say B plus C will equal D. If you can do that, you are dealing with a rational system. Irrational systems, you don't know what is there and how it really works until it is shown to you. My favorite examples with that are things like Mistborn, as opposed to Harry Potter. Because Mistborn is all about setting down basic rules and then exploring the implications and the logic of those rules. That's what Sanderson does a lot of the time. He sets a very simple effect and a very simple concept and a little bit of rules, and then he explores what that would mean. He really digs into the logic of it, which is why all of his stuff ends up being rational, is because he explored it rationally. On the other side, like with Harry Potter, the example I always give is there's the Expelliarmus spell, which we know can be used to knock a wand out of the hand of your opponent. That's all we know. If this was a Sanderson book, depending on how that worked, we would know whether that means you could knock anything out of their hands, whether you could knock a book, a gun, a knife out of their hands, whether it only had to be a magical object like a wand, a broom, a potion, but mundane objects it wouldn't work on. Like if it was Sanderson, we would know that, and we could follow that logic. Harry Potter, we can't. We know it works on wands, and that's all we know it works on until we see it work on something different. And that's what rational and irrational is. Now, none of these are... There is no best type of magic system. None of these are better than the others. So for a long time, I called this rational and nebulous because I didn't like the negative connotation of irrational. Because it's not a bad thing. It's just what it is. But each of these quadrants carry strengths and weaknesses that will shape how you can use them in your story and how you can use them in your world. And then stuff around the middle kind of gets a little bit of all the different ones, but you can't overplay it too much in any direction, or it can sort of upset the vibe and the balance. So yeah, that's the types of magic there, and that's one of the places a lot of people usually want to hear about.
Can you work a story? You know, because you talked about like throughout the book, if you have less than 50% or greater than 50%, can you have like a series that starts with like a soft magic system, something that doesn't get explained a lot in the first book, but then works its way to kind of a harder rational magic system?
Absolutely. And I'm going to jump up to this piece here, which is the perspective, because this is where perspective becomes really, really important. So the blueprint, these are a bunch of settings, right? You say that, hey, prevalence is medium high, flux is negative, ease of use is medium low. You put it in these specific spots. Really what you're doing is you're taking a snapshot of your magic system. So if your magic was a thing, an actual tangible thing like a statue, the blueprint is you taking a picture of that statue from a specific angle, a specific place around the statue, and at a specific time. If you change any of those aspects of the angle, the time of day, the height, any of that, the snapshot's going to look a little different. That's what perspective is. So the perspective you have your magic as the creator is going to be different than the perspective of your protagonist, which is going to be different from your readers, which will be different from your antagonist, which will also be different from your readers at the beginning of the story and the end of the story, potentially your world at the beginning of the trilogy and the end of the trilogy. It's perspective. You get to define. You are defining the angle you are taking a picture from, and you can build stories around any of that, because maybe that's what you want to do, where you start where the snapshot is that prevalence is really low in the world at the beginning of the book, but you want it maxed out by the end of the book. That's a story and a journey all of itself, where magic is just increasing by the day and everybody's having to scramble to figure out how to deal with it. Or it could be something that happens instantly, which is where you get some of the stuff that's like System Apocalypse and the lit RPG genre. It's so much you can play with. But yes, knowledge will naturally change over time, and that will also be affected by pacing and the learning curve you provide. Sanderson, for example, usually provides a lot of the information fairly early on in the book, usually about the first third. Most of it is out laid bare before the first half. Other people, it's a smoother curve where you are learning things all the way through the book. But when you do that, they don't get the feeling of it being a truly hard magic system until the end, unless they do a balancing act, which it sounds like Brent Weeks does, where he just presents you the simple stuff and then keeps adding more. So every step of the way, you feel like you know everything, but then you see a little deeper. So again, a rambling answer to your question.
No, I love that. There's actually, I don't know it verbatim, but there's a line in Lightbringer where basically one of their leaders says, we always assume that we're at the top, like the peak of technology. Like we're at the height of history as far as like the things that we've discovered and where we're at. But we're always on it's a curve. We're always going up, and some point it's going to come back down. Right. And so I love thinking about the perspective, because if you have, I know some authors will do like the little flash chapters that are interim POVs that you don't necessarily see them a ton, but it's like something happens from, like the kid who's shoveling out the stables, sees something, and how is he going to, understand what's going on if he's never seen someone who does magic before? You know, those
Right.
kinds of things are super interesting to consider for your plot.
Right. Absolutely. And that's where perspective is super useful.
So tell us about, I'm looking at these, and if you want to hit, so we've talked about transference and prevalence a little. Tell us about flux.
Okay. So flux is a fun one, and that is a term that comes straight out of engineering, because engineering is just it is the change of something within a boundary over time, which is super generic, but that boundary can be anything. It could be a box, it could be a refrigerator, it could be your room, it could be your body. You can define what the scope of the system is. And flux is just whether the amount of the thing in that boundary is increasing, decreasing, or staying the same. For example, heat. Refrigerators, if you look at the inside of the refrigerator, that has a negative flux. Heat is being sucked out, which is why it is cold inside the refrigerator. It's being pumped out and transported elsewhere. But then if you look at your room as a whole, it's actually your room where the refrigerator is neutral, because the heat is being pumped out of the refrigerator and into the room, so it's not actually changing. At least then you look a little deeper and realize, well, you're pulling electrical current in, which, while that's not heat, energy is coming in. So prevalence is how commonplace your magic is, how much there is in the world. Flux is the change of prevalence over time from whatever your perspective is. So as a creator, if we're looking at the entire world, is the system as a whole growing, fading, or is the amount of magic staying the same? The other interesting thing about flux is this is net change. You are not asking whether anything is entering and you're not defining whether something is entering or leaving. You are defining whether more is entering than is leaving, or if more is leaving than is entering, or if the rate of exchange is the same. So again, going back to perspective, depending on how you want to look at this is going to change your answers. If we look at Lord of the Rings, that's my favorite example for flux, because by the end of the trilogy, the world is definitively less magical than it was at the beginning of the trilogy. Ring of Power has been destroyed. Sauron is dead. Balrog has been defeated. Saruman has been defeated. Yeah, elves are leaving. The ring bearers are leaving. There is less magic in the world. Lord of the Rings has the definition of negative flux. However, if you were to take that and add a quirk to it, tell the exact same story, but actually feed into more of the advanced tech that is building up in its place. So let's say we took Lord of the Rings and Altered Carbon and mashed them together so that the magical stuff is fading, but the cyber tech is on the rise. You could actually end up with a net neutral flux of magic in your world overall, because one system is dying and one system is growing. But then you look at one system or the other, and then flux will be either negative or positive depending on which one you're looking at. Flux is a lot of fun. And that's another one where, when you talked about the beginning of the book and the end of the book, especially when you're looking at series, there's so much potential for story fodder there by just saying, I don't know how, but by the end of book, in book 2, I want to introduce this kind of flux. And by the end of book 3, I want it to be even stronger, or I want things to have neutralized out, right? Lots of stuff to play with there.
I feel like we could have a whole tangent about that, because there are so many.
I can talk about any of this stuff.
Because you look at so many fantasy, series, and a lot of them are either magic is dying and it's a problem, or magic is suddenly back and it's a problem, right? Those are two pretty common tropes. But then when you say, okay, if by the end of book 2, like you were saying, I want magic to be going down, what's going to cause that? And you can think about all the different ways, do I want a creature to come in and create a rift that's going to, the magic is all going to, eke out or something, or, is it going to be something that my villain is going to do? There are just so many opportunities.
Right.
So I think people know about flux, but wouldn't have had like a word for it and couldn't define it or like think really, simplistically almost. Like when you have a word, when you can define something, it's easier to think about, right? So that's what I think is so great about the system that you've lined up.
Well, and one of my... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Clark.
That's really my goal with the blueprint, and honestly all of the nonfiction stuff I do, all of my blog posts, all of my videos, especially with magic, I'm not doing anything new. I'm really just trying to take things that we are already doing and solidify the concepts. To be like, hey, this is what you're doing, and like this is what it is, and this we now have a way to talk about it. That's what I really like doing.
No, I was just going to say, because you brought up like Lord of the Rings as a very, very easy flux to pick up. But we were talking about changing the flux over the course of books. One of the series that I've read recently that I've really enjoyed that kind of like, and it was almost a driving part of the storyline was the flux of magic, was Sarah J. Maas's Glass of Thrones or Throne of Glass series. And it, it's funny because she explains it in some ways that magic used to be super prevalent and now it's not. And then it suddenly becomes prevalent again. And so you get to see kind of the horseshoe of effects, right? Where it's just, you nice. See who's in power and why, and based on what kind of thing. And you start to get all of the answers and why those things occur and how they get rid of it. And it's really like, it is a nice. Driving factor behind the storylines besides her characters. And it's really like, it's a really cool adventure to go on.
Yeah. Sounds like it. Rachel just read that series. I haven't picked it up yet.
I've not read it either. I know that they're super, super popular.
I think her, the Court series.
The Court of Thorns and Roses, I think.
Yeah.
It's one of those where it's like the blank of blank and blank, and the whole series is like that. And I'm sure I'm getting them mixed up.
I think that one's more popular for her, but for me, I knew her because of Throne of Glass.
Gotcha.
So
that was yeah.
Anyway,
so,
go off on a tangent talking about books.
Yeah, it's good examples for everybody who's looking for like even if you're having a hard time. Now Clark's really good at explaining things, but if you're having a hard time following some stuff or you want to go see an example of something, having these examples thrown out is usually kind of a nice thing to have.
And
yeah, so as you guys are finished listening to this and you go forward, if you check out some of this stuff, I would recommend picking out one of your favorite books and pulling up a copy of the blueprint and trying to identify where the magic system lands on the different spectrums. Because I think that thinking about it that way will be super helpful as you're trying to identify what's most important or most interesting to you. And then the magic system blueprint also, Clark has a ton of examples. So every time he outlines a principle, he says, okay, so in this series or in this book, and then he kind of breaks it down to give you an idea of what it looks like in practice too.
And the blueprint is available for free. Like what you're looking at here, you can get on my website. I'll make sure that these guys have the links so that you can go do that. So you can print this off and you can fill that out. I am very interested to hear and see what people come up with. Like the important part of that is understanding that your perspective most of the time is going to be that of the reader. And just understanding that that's what your perspective is can make things very interesting as you're filling it out. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys come up with when you kind of check this on some of your own stories that you like. I am going to turn my light on real quick because it's getting darker.
I know. I love that you're over there on the West Coast, and I've been wallowing in darkness the whole time since before we started recording this because I'm in Virginia. So I was trying to set my lights up early, and it was light earlier, and so I couldn't figure out what to do with my ring light because now it's dark outside. It's dark outside, and the cockroaches are coming out. They've sensed that it's safe.
I think they just thought you were just feeling too cozy, safe and cozy in your own chair, and they were ready to make your life a little more interesting.
Interesting is one word.
But yes, I don't know. Is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about?
I'm sure that we will have you back. Even just as we've been talking, I've written a couple things down where I'm like, we should talk about this, and there's, not time. One thing that we can do is, as people are listening to these episodes, if they want to reach out to us and say, hey, we have questions for Clark about whatever, or as we come up with other things, we will certainly be in touch. I think that this has been phenomenal, though. I love how organized you are. I really appreciate your knowledge base and, just how awesome you were to come and, put up with us. It's been great.
Oh, because you guys are so hard to put up with.
Occasionally. I can't speak for Shady, but for myself.
I love talking about this stuff. I do.
A bit to Haley's point too. If you want to see some of this stuff, and I'm sure Clark we'll post all of the stuff for his different, like his Patreon, his YouTube, his website. All of that will be in the show notes. And if he's got a way to contact him directly on his website, you'll see it there. So
yep, there's a contact page.
Does. Yeah. Highly recommend.
So, but yeah, we will for sure have him back on for something else.
Because it's too easy, and this is one of my favorite subjects. So,
yeah. Any last questions, Haley?
I think that wraps up sort of the stuff that I had hoped to get done in the time frame. So, Clark, is there anything that we missed? Any final notes?
I mean, I don't think so. There's always more we can talk about, and
yeah.
If I do come back, I'm always interested in digging in deeper on some of these specific things, or even talk. There's other like offhanded comments I have made while talking with you guys that we want to explore with that. I'm down for that too, because Blueprint I know very well. It took years for me to like get the information so it's together. But yeah, if we want to dig into other stuff, if we want to dig into that deeper, I'm game.
Yeah, we would love to do that. I think it would be awesome. I said I've been taking notes the whole time. So.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you so much.
It's been
fun. Seriously.
We always enjoy talking to you. It's never a bad experience for anybody. So
when are we going to see you in the real world, Clark? Do you have cons coming up in the fall?
I'm going to be going to a conference in October. It's the Clifton Strengths. It's the Strengths conference that Becca Syme is doing. And then probably the next one is going to be Superstars.
Okay. Clark usually teaches a class at Superstars. It is excellent. I'm pointing down because that's where he is on my screen. Sorry. His class is great. So if you guys have a chance to come check that out, that one's in Colorado Springs.
Superstars is a good one.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody for showing up and listening, and giving us your eye holes and your ear holes to fill with more knowledge about world building. We appreciate you stopping by. Make sure you leave a review wherever you're watching these podcasts. Again, I've been your host, Shady, along with my co-host there, Haley, who did a phenomenal job running this interview, and Clark. Thank you again for being a guest. Much appreciated.
Not a problem.
Yeah, you're the best.
But we will catch you guys on the next episode. Welcome to the end of yet another episode of Worlds Asunder. This time it was Clark Rowenson on Magic Systems. We hope you learned some things and got to see his cool little sheet, and now you know what we're talking about. If you've seen this episode before or listened to this episode before, you've now seen what we were talking about throughout. Clark's always great to talk to and give mentorship on not just building magic systems, but writing and world building in general. So go check out his website. Speaking of, you can find that in the show notes. As always, Haley's done a wonderful job with those, so go follow us. Let us know how we're doing. Next time on Worlds Asunder, Gotta Get Stronger, Part 1. We're going to talk to the Stovall, Shammy and John, and delve into some world building for Lit RPG. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast.
And as always, thanks for helping us tear the worlds asunder. We'll see you next time.